today's topic, Jade, we're going to talk about laundry. And I was trying to think about what to talk about today, and while it sounds like an incredibly boring topic, there is a reason why I wanted to talk about laundry. And it is because the ATO seem to have a major focus on laundry, particularly for individual tax returns.
They do, and I think especially as of late, with people's working arrangements changing with COVID and people working from home, it is an area that the ATO are now focusing on a lot more.
Yeah, so just as a bit of a side note, this last week I got contacted by the ATO, and they're doing what they call their usual check-up with tax agents to give us some statistics about how they rank us and how they see us as a risk and what have you. And what I found really interesting on the report that they provided me was that essentially from an individual tax return point of view, the way they rank agents has a lot to do with how much laundry they claim. And the statistics say that in 2018 and 2019, over 6 million taxpayers have claimed some sort of laundry or uniform claim on their tax return, and that equates to nearly half of the eligible taxpayers in Australia, which means that more than or around half of taxpayers think they have an eligible uniform. And clearly that's not the case. And that led to a shortfall of about $1.5 billion in tax revenue, according to the ATO. So you can kind of see why they're interested in it, even though it seems so trivial.
Yes, that's right, because $1.5 billion is certainly a lot of money that if the tax office are paying out that they don't have to, they're going to start looking into that a lot more.
And I think they sort of look at tax agents and say, well, if we just automatically claim $150 for laundry or claim uniform without actually questioning our clients about it, what else are we potentially claiming and not questioning as well?
That's right. And I do think laundry is one of the things that people just throw in their tax return willy-nilly without really thinking about. So it might be time to actually start thinking about that and whether your claim is legitimate.
Okay, so let's start with what is a uniform. Jade, have you got any tips on how you know if it's a uniform or not?
I do. So I know a lot of people may wear black slacks to work or a plain white blouse, and that is actually not considered a uniform in the eyes of the tax office. So that is not tax deductible. So for a uniform to be tax deductible and to be able to claim the laundry, it must be registered with Oz Industry. So this is an industry where employers register their logo, and that makes it a registered uniform that you're able to claim the laundry on. I would also like to note that high-vis clothing is considered protective clothing, so any tradies that wear high-vis shirts or protective boots, that is considered a uniform and can be a tax deduction.
Yeah, so just to clarify there, when we're talking about logos on uniforms, we're talking about those things that aren't necessarily protective clothing. So if you are wearing high-vis, it doesn't have to have a logo on it. It doesn't have to be registered with Oz Industry. But for someone like us who work in an accounting firm, if we want to have a uniform that has our logo all over it and claim that as a tax deduction, it really needs to have that registered with the Oz Industry authorities. And in that circumstance, we can then claim that uniform as a tax deduction. So the other thing that you can claim is if it is something specific to your business type, your occupation. So an example of that would be a clergyman or a chef who has to wear a chef's apron or something like that. They don't obviously have to be registered either. And, you know, if you were working in something that has a compulsory uniform, so for example, if you were a police officer or something like that, then that would also be included.
Yes, a lot of the time the way I think about it is if you are able to wear your uniform outside of work, then it's more than likely not able to be a tax deduction. So you wouldn't often see a chef wearing their uniform outside of work to dinner on a Friday night. Whereas someone who might be a personal trainer in a gym who wears gym clothes, tights and gym tops, you could potentially wear those clothes outside of work, and people most likely do. So it is not they're not usually considered a tax deduction. So that's usually the way I determine it, whether it can be worn outside of work or not.
Exactly. And we do have a lot of people who say, yeah, but I don't wear them outside of work. But again, it's not whether you choose to or not, it's whether you could. So a lot of people do try to claim their suits, particularly, businessmen or whatever who have their business suits, which are quite expensive. They're not tax deductible, unfortunately, so just be aware of that. So what about laundry? So do you want to talk about that, Jade?
Sure. So there is if you do have a genuine work uniform, there is a calculation that we use, or you use if you complete your own tax return, to have a tax deduction for the laundering of any uniforms that are considered eligible with the tax office. So it is calculated on the basis of whether you wash your work clothes on their own, or whether you wash them with other normal clothes. So it is a bit of a funny calculation. However, you can claim $1 per wash if your uniform is washed on its own, or if you wash them with other general clothes, you can claim 50 cents per wash.
That's right. Now, if you do the math, and obviously we're accountants, so we do math, there's 52 weeks in a year. So to claim the $150, which is the standard deduction that a lot of people use, because we do not need any evidence for $150 worth of laundry, and you can't actually claim any more than $150 worth of laundry. That means washing, like that's separate to dry cleaning. I'm talking about just putting it in the washing machine and washing it. So to do that, you'd have to have washed your uniform 3 times a week for 50 weeks of the year, and separately, not with anything else. So that's how we get to $150, and not everyone does that.
No, the 3 times a week on their own is quite a lot of washing. I know I definitely don't wash my work clothes that much, as I have clothes that I wear different days every week. So 3 times per week on their own is quite a lot of washing.
That's right. So if you were, say, a motor mechanic and your clothes were incredibly dirty, well, you probably quite well could get to that 3 times a week on their own, because you're probably not going to wash them with all the other clothes. But for people who are working, with just a logo on their T-shirt, they're probably not going to be doing that. So what else is it that the ATO might look at with regard to how many times you might wash?
Of course. So as I mentioned earlier, there have been a lot of changes to the way people are working. So people are working from home a lot more, and more than likely people probably aren't wearing their full work uniform while they're sitting at home if they're working. So just be mindful that if you are working from home, your laundry probably has decreased. And if you are claiming work from home expenses on your tax return, but your laundry is still the same as the previous year, that might raise a red flag with the tax office. Also, if you are having time off, so I know Joe mentioned previously that the $150 claim is 3 times per week for 50 weeks per year. That only leaves you 2 weeks that you've had off work. I know a lot of people probably have more than 2 weeks off over the year. So just keep in mind, if you take any annual leave or if there's any time off that you have, to be wary of that.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to claiming your uniform, yes, we've talked about the fact that you can only claim those uniforms that have been approved. So the ATO will start to flag anyone who is claiming more than a certain amount. They start to look at those people and will question their tax deductions. So if you are, buying a corporate uniform for some reason and spending a lot of money on that, and claiming laundry and claiming dry cleaning as well, make sure you have all your receipts and you can totally justify that, because it's quite likely the ATO will question it.
Definitely, and a claim of $150 probably isn't worth the hassle of getting an ATO audit.
No, exactly. So let me just also clarify that if they do audit you for any other reason and you have got a laundry claim, they're going to ask about that.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so that's probably enough about laundry today. I'm sure it's something that everyone just, is fascinated with, but it is really one of those things that we want to highlight to people, because a lot of our clients question us when we ask about their clothes, and we see their receipts being sent in and they're from City Beach or Suzanne's or whatever, and we know they're not uniforms. So that we're not trying to be the ones who are the bearer of bad news there, but we just want to make sure that you don't get into trouble.
That's right.
Okay, thanks, Jade.
Thanks, Joe.